Hey guys, it's Monday, January 2nd, and this is the first news wave of 2017. So you'd figure there'd be more news. I mean, it was New Year's weekend. I mean, nothing else is happening. What are people doing? Celebrating the new year? But of course, there was still stuff that happened, just not as much as usual. Keep in mind, as we get into the new year and CES coming up, and of course we move towards that Switch presentation, there's going to be a lot of stuff popping up, so these Newswave videos are going to be a lot longer. If you're a fan of Harvest Moon, especially the ones on the PS2, actually it looks like they're getting released on the PS4 because the ESRB, also known as the Entertainment Software Rating Board, is actually rating both games, Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life and Harvest Moon: Save the Homeland, for the PS4. So this looks like this is going to be Natsumi's basically the first shot at putting a PS2 game on the PS4, whether it be like a direct port. These could possibly be like a compilation disc, like, Harvest Moon Collection in HD, 1080, 60 frames, all that good stuff. If you enjoyed Stardew Valley, for example, and maybe you missed out on these PS2 games because maybe you weren't really, either around at the time, or maybe you weren't able to pick these games up and enjoy them like you could now, I suggest if it is a collection, if it is like a disc that comes out you can buy or download, I would suggest getting it and trying it out, because Harvest Moon is a great series back then, and it still is now. I still would play it if they came out with a new one. I would probably pick these up. I play a lot of Stardew Valley, so check them out. There's no release date on this. They just rated it. I assume that means it's almost ready for release, so I would check sometime 2017, maybe like first quarter, or maybe even closer to E3. We'll see. So this is the big thing that happened at the beginning of the weekend. It was like Friday, I think this came out. Obi-Wan, of course, is doing his Switch leaks, essentially. I know he's doing one on Monday as well, so I'll talk about it as well on Newswave, but he came out and said, of course, VR is in the works for the Switch. There's more to it than just the patents. And then he said that he was going to tell us about a game, and he did. He told us that apparently Resident Evil is coming to the Switch as well as the PS4 and the Xbox One, of course. And this is interesting. This got a lot of people very curious about how they're going to make this work, because I have to imagine the PS4 is probably not having an easy time with Resident Evil in VR. The Pro probably is having an easier time. The original PS4 running VR with that kind of game, with that kind of fidelity and everything, I can't imagine is easy. So I have a feeling the Switch is encountering the technical problems that he's talking about. He said that the Switch is having a hard time rendering it with VR and everything, obviously, because you're having essentially two images rendering and then overlaying them, all that good stuff. Well, it's having issues, and I understand that completely. The frame rate is got to be struggling on that system, as it's basically, as we've talked about before, a tablet. I don't think the Xbox One would even be able to render that thing in VR. I think that's why we still don't have a VR headset for the Xbox One. I think that's going pretty much straight to the Scorpio. I don't think the original Xbox One or even the Slim will ever see VR. Also, I remember hearing it kind of in the rumor mill, or maybe that it's fact at this point, that the PlayStation had some sort of exclusivity for VR with Resident Evil. That would kind of back up this claim that Resident Evil will not be out for a while on the Switch, possibly up to a year, probably because of that exclusivity deal, so we may not see it till the following year for the Switch. That'll give them enough time to get stuff ironed out, or maybe even drop VR completely and then release it holiday season. I'm hear something really weird. Apparently Atlantic City is actually going to start using video games to help their slot machines and gambling at the casinos. So they're partnering with Gameco, any of the Atlantic City casinos, like I think Bally's, anything like that. They're partnering with Gameco, and Gameco is actually making the machines that are basically going to act as essentially video game gambling machines. And it sounds funny because it is. It's going to be first-person shooters, MOBAs, fighting games like, I guess, Street Fighter, for example, puzzle games, hidden objects like I Spy, sports games, maybe like a Madden. I assume they cannot use any of the normal names, like any of the trademark names, like Madden, like Call of Duty, like Street Fighter. They'll probably make their own generic kind of crappy games, to be honest, out of any assets and stuff they come up with. They'll probably be very, very, I don't want to say bad, but definitely not good games that are going to do this. And most people will just be sucked in for the idea of being able to win actual money, depending on how many headshots you get or how fast you can find an object on the screen. Now, they have been trying to basically team up with companies, I assume, like I said before, to possibly use the IPs that they wouldn't be allowed to use otherwise. So you may see some games that you recognize there, but I don't know if they'll be able to get every one. They've partnered with like Blizzard, Ubisoft, and DreamWorks, and I assume they're just going to try to use their IPs to make them a little more appealing to people. But again, they probably won't be able to get the sports game, like a Madden football or something like that. That would be very tough, I think. So, I don't know how well it's going to work. Atlantic City's been struggling for a while now, more so than any other, I guess, gambling place. I don't even know what you'd call it. Gambling city. I went there once. It was okay. I made the mistake of walking 100 feet away from the casino outside, and it turned into Detroit very quickly, like the bad part of Detroit. So I don't know how Atlantic City expects this to work. I do know they need to get more modern, because slot machines obviously are geared more towards the older crowd. A lot of the younger crowd goes there, sees the slot machine, pulls the handle 3 times, then leaves. That's why I don't see a lot of younger people doing it. I think if you could have a Call of Duty that is actually like money based, it could help the Atlantic City gambling scene. Although keep in mind, this could also lead way to addicting all of the younger generation, the fresh 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds going in there and becoming addicted to gambling. That could cause some problems too, so keep that in mind. So this is a cool little story about the DS. The old handheld, obviously, we all loved back in the day when it started releasing, games like the Pokemon Golden Sun, all kinds of stuff, and it had the Game Boy Advance backwards compatibility. Went on to be a huge success, obviously, in Japan and all around the world. Well, the story goes that actually internally, most of the designers, engineers, everything were heavily opposed to the DS at the time. This comes straight from Satoru Okada, and he's actually the general manager of Nintendo Research and Engineering before he retired in 2012. And in a recent interview with Retro Gamer magazine, he actually talks about kind of the internal struggle that went on, because most of the team wanted to basically make the successor to the Game Boy Advance at the time. I mean, that was a pretty good handheld then too. And they did, of course, keep backwards compatibility with the DS Lite, but that originally was supposed to be a new Game Boy Advance style successor. And he goes on and actually quoted here to say, actually, after the SP, we were working on the newest model in this range. The code name for this new Game Boy was Iris, like the flower. The explanation for this name is simple. Since it was, for us, the 5th generation of Game Boy, we chose the symbol of May, the 5th month of the year. In the Hanafuda playing cards, the month of May is symbolized by the iris. The project was moving forward at a good pace, but during the development, something unexpected happened. So this is also a quote. It says, President Iwata then came to see me. He was obviously bothered, and he said, I talked to Yamachi-san over the phone, and he thinks your console should have 2 screens, a bit like the multi-screen Game & Watch, you see? So they're of course going back to the old Game & Watches, which when I actually had first seen one years and years ago, I of course basically compared it to the DS Lite and was like, wow, that's kind of a cool comparison there where they got the idea from. And he goes on to say, everybody is aware of this, but what people do not know is that at the time, everybody hated this idea. Even Iwata himself, we thought it did not make any sense. Apparently, despite numerous claims, urges, everything to say, hey, let's not do the second screen, Iwata stuck with it. And man, he was dead on with that, because that was their best-selling system to date. That was it right there. And you know what? Sometimes it's tough when everybody around you obviously is pressuring you into doing what they think is right, and he stuck to his guns, so good for him, man. That's a really cool story to have for him. And of course, at the end of the year, like a lot of companies do, Steam released a chart basically showing all of the games that had grossed the most money overall in terms of like just gross revenue, and they put them into categories. So these companies never give us an exact list with exact amounts or anything. They like to be vague about it. I understand you have to basically make the report as concise as possible before you release it publicly, because then you're kind of locked to it. But they were nice enough at least to give us categories as to what sold better than what. And of course, the category that everybody really just cares about is the top category, which they labeled Platinum. Of course, games like Witcher 3 were in there, Fallout 4, CSGO. No Man's Sky was in there, which I bet you if they counted the refunds that people were begging for, it might have gone down a tier. Warhammer, Rocket League, which is one of my favorite games. I'm really happy to see that in there, because that's great. Keep in mind, Rocket League has always been a cheaper game. It's always been a $20 game. So these other ones that have grossed the same that were released at $60, that's pretty impressive for them. Dota 2 is free to play, yet still is grossing very high because of all the in-game purchases obviously you can do. Division, Civilization 6, which Civ 6 came out recently, so that's pretty cool too. XCOM 2, Dark Souls 3, Grand Theft Auto 5 will remain a top seller until 6 comes out. It just will, because it's It's a great game. A lot of people like the Grand Theft Auto series, and I'm sure it'll continue to sell on the Xbox One, the PS4, even the PS3, and the 360. If you want to check out the entire list, I will leave a link to the description down below, and you can check that out for yourself. They do go through a couple categories. There's platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and I think that's it. But it goes through basically all of them, and if you want to buy it right then and there, you can. I know a lot of them are on sale as of today as well. And guys, if you missed it, it looks like Breath of the Wild may actually be coming out closer to the Switch launch than we originally have been rumored. Of course, rumors are flying all over the place that Breath of the Wild would miss the release for the Switch, would be pushed closer to like the summer, maybe in fall. But recent leaks, rumors, all kinds of stuff have started to come out, including marketing material, showing us that it actually might make the launch with the Switch. You might be able to walk in, buy the Switch day one, and get Breath of the Wild on the way out. That would be amazing. And it was kind of leaked a little bit, like I said, with marketing material. Laura Kate Dale kind of went back, had a rumor from a Nintendo of America employee somewhere, we don't know who the leak would come from there, saying that it looks like it might actually be coming then. And we also had a little more confirmation from a magazine called CoroCoro. Now, this is a manga magazine in Japan, and it actually kind of goes over. You'll see it here. It does talk about the Switch, of course, coming out in March, but then it also talks about the Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, coming out in spring, which could place it right at the end of March in that March release window. Mind, this is a Japanese magazine, so it would also be talking about a Japanese release date. I have a feeling that Zelda will come out 1 week in the United States, the following week in Japan, or vice versa, depending on when the Switch starts to actually roll out in either country. This would also probably be different if you live in Europe or other parts of the world. I'm really not sure what the staggered launch would be. Very rarely does a system come out at the exact same time everywhere in the world. It's almost staggered by a week or two or more. Like I said before, Japan gets the PS4 like 2 months later than the United States, so you never know when that actually happens. I just hope that the Switch is close enough. 1 week, game, comes out here, game comes out there, and then we all have the Switch and we're playing Zelda. But yes, guys, it looks like Breath of the Wild is probably making that March release with the Switch. I'm excited. I'm sure you are too. We've seen so much of this game. I just want to get it, and let's just play it. And that's going to do it for Newswave today, guys. I hope you had a good time. And this is the first one of the new year. I'm very excited for 2017 to see what that brings. Of course, I want to see the Switch. I want to see all the different games, Final Fantasy 7. Hopefully, Kingdom Hearts 3 makes its release 2017. We'll see. And I want to see Scorpio and all that good stuff. So definitely subscribe, like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you tomorrow, guys, for more Newswave.